My name is Martin Halliwell, and I'm here to tell you the story of footprint engineering and earth honoring systems. I'm here today to bring on special guests. Today, our guest is a leader in the concrete industry. Today, our guest is a leader in the use of geothermal energy. Today, we'd like to talk about concrete. Today, we would like to talk about your owner problem. Joe, thanks for coming on the Value Engineering Experts podcast, sponsored by Footprint Engineering. I'm excited to have a man with your experience, and you've accomplished a lot in your career, Joe. What do you attribute to all the success lately? Is it just being a team player, or what is it? How's that happen?
Well, first of all, Martin, thanks for having me on this podcast with you today. And one thing I will say that I contribute my success to is the teaching of my mother and father. My teachings of my father was your name means more than money, and you can never tarnish your name, because that's what people will always remember you by, is by your name. And my mother just taught us to be honest and tell the truth. So those are the principles that's got me to where I'm at today from my mother and father.
Yeah, that's a great answer. You know, I myself, as an engineer, benefited from an example of integrity in my father. My dad was actually born in 1912, if you can believe that.
Wow.
I bet you that goes. When was your grandfather born? Because I know you're second generation finisher, right?
I'm the third generation finisher. My dad is the second, and my grandfather had been the first, and he was born in 1922, I believe it was.
So is your grandfather alive?
No, he passed away in 1985, I believe it was. And my dad is still currently alive at this moment.
Yeah, my dad passed in 89, and my mother was a great example. So we share that. I think you need to get those things right in life. And, you know, I feel a lot of compassion for kids who don't get it the way we got it, right?
Right. Amen on that.
Yeah. How many kids you got now, Joe?
I have 3 children. I have Gabriel. He is 27. Hannah is 25. And Levi is soon to be 20.
We're going to talk a little bit down the line here, but about your dedication to the autistic association and whatnot. And I admire that as well. You know, if we can give back, if we can do things for others, we're going to be enriched with it.
Correct.
But anyway, E5, that's an interesting name. Let's talk a little bit about your technology. And I am really intrigued by it. As some people may know, I've involved it in a concrete patent, a waterproof concrete patent. And, you know, we're dealing with John Belkowitz, and he's a big fan of what colloidal silica can do. So you have a whole raft of products, and we're going to help you in Canada as much as we can with associations that we have all over North America as well, with Rory Bosma, somebody else, I think, who turned me on to you. You know, Rory was the top selling spray lock guy at one time. You may know that. And he speaks very highly of yourself. And I understand you've actually done a lot of what do you call the Department of Transport? We call it Ministry of Transport up here, but the bridge decks you're doing. Tell us a little bit about the bridge deck, the typical bridge deck.
Typical bridge deck in Indiana has a lot of cementitious material in it. And that was all decided by water cement ratios here in our state. They wanted a low water cement ratio of 0.40, 0.42, and then that drove the cementitious material up. When I got involved with the NDOT people, they were having a lot of problems with a lot of cracking, a lot of reflective cracking, decks not holding up 5 to 6 years past its pour dates. And a lot of that was due to the poor capillary structures were too open at that time. When I got involved with them, they wanted to know the same thing you just asked, is what is E5 and what does it stand for? The trademark name is Element 5, because I always believed that concrete was always missing a fundamental element in its structure, and it was always curing. Curing is probably the most neglected thing in our industry, even today. People claim they do it, and they do it successful, whether it be by wet cure, whether it be by curing compounds or other traditional types of cures. I was always an inquisitive person, is like, how do you control the water with inside the matrix of concrete? And as a young kid, I'd always ask my dad, why haven't they came up with something that you could just put in the mix that would help it self-cure or help it to start curing at the beginning of its stage. And my dad was an old, rugged union guy. And that's not up to us. Your best cure you're ever going to get is to wet cure, a water cure. So I was ingrained at a young age that wet cure was the only way you could have success in concrete. When I got involved with this type of technology, the nano silicas and the colloidal silicas, its behavior was it liked to attach its elements to other elements. So when I started messing around with it, I said, these are the elements we've been missing. So I looked at E5 or element 5 as the missing piece. So you got concrete is made of cement, coarse ag, fine ag, and water. Well, if you add the nano silica, you now have the fifth component that we've been missing to complete the ingredients of a good concrete. So that's where the name came from. Well, NDOT wanted to know, and I just described to them the exact same thing I told you. And then they got inquisitive over that. And that was 2 years ago. And right now we're over 100+ bridges here in our state without any wet cure and just curing with the internal cure at the current moment.
That's great explanation. I mean, you must get that question a lot. What's E5? But that's great that our listeners, and there'll be many, will have that explanation. And I finally understand it now. You know, we're going to combine your product with several colloidals along with it. But before we move on to that, and we have mag oxide in our really best mix, we call it Fang Mix 2. But tell me a little bit about Shot Cure, and you have a number of other products.
Mm-hmm.
And can you go through them as if you're doing a presentation almost, and tell us maybe your top 4 or 5? I know the catalyst is very interesting. And
yeah. So just as I described before, E5 internal cure is the fun foundation of our products. It is a particular size and shape, and it's suspended in a solution. And its size and shape and the way it is manufactured and done, it helps it bind the water molecules to the cement. And that is our foundation of all of our product sets. So my next favorite product that is available is what we call E5 liquid fly ash. E5 liquid fly ash is a very unique product, and it is manufactured right in our warehouse here in Noblesville. It is a multiple blend of silicas and nanosilicas with a little bit of extra, I should say, chemical that helps it give it its drive in the pozzolanic world. And it has been one of my favorites to see developed and to see come to fruition in this market. It was created because we're having the F ash and the C ash kind of shortages in certain areas and the unreliability of the manufacturing process of fly ashes. So that product is right now being vetted extremely hard with our local DOT. And we now have at least 3 full structures of bridges with that product. And it's holding up very well, and soon to be in a new memo for our new overlays and certain bridge applications. The third product that is another one that is on that line is the E5 Shot Cure. E5 Shot Cure is a much wider distribution of particles within it to allow for a better rebound and better cohesiveness, and allows that material to stick together better as it's coming out of the hose, so you retain more of the product. And then it will also have those self-curing capabilities and technologies within those blends of nanosilicas. Finally, the one product that is very intriguing to a lot of people is the E5 Catalyst. And it does exactly what it says. It's a catalyst. And that product is added to the E5 internal cure or the E5 liquid fly ash during certain applications, like for flooring mitigation, shake-on hardener replacements. And what it causes is a pH thunderstorm at the surface of that concrete to close those capillaries up into the nanometers, so water has a more difficult time getting in the concrete or out of the concrete. And finally, another one that is really big is adding E5 Protect to a slab to get that extra shine. I call it the poor man's polish. You can run a buffer, high-speed buffer or burnisher across it, and it'll give you the same reflection of a diamond grinded floor. So those are the 5 products that is used a lot right now at the current moment.
One question I had thought about was, is it easier to get a finished floor standard like an FFL standard with your system? You know, do we save time with finishers? I see a lot of finishers that stay on floors, over burnish. You know, nobody's really watching them. They leave them late at night. And I think one of the reasons you're often on sites is to teach these finishers, don't over burnish a floor.
I love Martin. That's probably one of my favorite questions about this. You know, coming from that finishing line in our family, does E5 help the FFFL factor? Yes, it does. And no, it doesn't. So I'll explain yes, why it does. Once you learn the technology, you learn that you can allow these type of technologies to let the concrete not be disturbed in an early stage. So let's say hypothetically, you're out there pouring your slab and you hand strike it off and you bowl float it. That is as flat as the floor will ever be. Your FL is all you. It's all up to the craftsman and how he places it. And it's only as level as he has the tools or the capability of making it level. That's where E5 doesn't really help you, but it's all up to the craftsman. Where it helps you is the FF by allowing that floor to set after it's been placed and touched for a longer period of time. It'll allow you to get on that surface instead of we call it in our finisher world, you know, we'll step on it. And if we press down into the surface a certain distance, then we know the floor is ready. With this, you can let it go to where the print is just a 1/16 of an inch, and you still have plenty of paste and cream to move around to create an FFF floor. So traditionally, I used to hit floors, you know, 10, 13 times to get it back to an FF that I was needing. With this, I was cutting that in half because the water was being retained within the paste, and that's my natural surfactant and my finishing aid, and it allowed me to have a better FF on the floor. Now, to get back to the FL of the portion of this, where this can help you out is that we started to see steadier slumps within our mixture. So by producing a better slump or a more consistent slump, the finishers had better control versus going from a wet load, dry load, wet load. These loads were more cohesive, and I consider it kind of like the SEC world, where the concrete's like kinetic sand and it kind of rolls back into itself. That's what you see with when you start using E5 type of technologies. And it allows that concrete to be more cohesive, less segregation. So therefore the placement would become easier for the craftsman, therefore allowing him to get it more level. So it definitely helps you in that area once you go through the learning process. And that's why I'm a lot of times on the jobs teaching them. And once it clicks with them 2 or 3 times, their numbers come up 6 to 8% on their applications.
Yeah, that's great. So you feel that another question I would have is, you know, what do you attribute to long life? Would you say durability or strength? Are we going for durability?
I'm all about durability. Durability is the secret to long-lasting concrete.
Yeah, I would agree. Have you had many applications where you've had Sika's Mag Ox involved? You know,
yes, several projects here in the Indianapolis area that we've been doing with parking garages where that product has been used with us. We're doing the curing part of the stage, and it's doing its job it does for the shrinkage and the expansion. And we were shaving 40 days off of schedules with pourbacks into the parking garages with that product. So it's now being spec'd in certain projects and parking garages here locally together with those 2 products.
I believe the future is that every pour in form work or in flat work, decks, abutments, thick shotcrete pours, I think everything should have your product. And I say the same thing about another additive, and I don't know how much experience you've had with Aquagel. Have you had anything real firsthand experience with Aquagel? Because that's a slurry going on a weight of water replacement basis. And it's an amazing product because it'll hold slump for 3 hours. Mind you, you hold slump also, but not necessarily for 2 or 3 hours. It's called a rheology modifier. And that's in our Fang Mix 1. By the way, we're having very good results. We got 20% over control on permeability. And that's a great result for what we would call your shock cure. And we're testing Fang Mix 2. So I'll share that stuff with you, and I'll probably have Belkowitz himself on at some point. They said that we shouldn't crowd the screen, but anyway, it's great to have a tradesman like you on the thing. You know, footprint engineering is all about the resonance that happens with an engineer who knows what he's doing, and then we'll listen, and a tradesman who wants to do a better job.
Yep.
You know, the two together are what society needs. And I'm excited with the future of concrete, with individuals like yourself bringing with it many, many years of experience. Let me ask one more question too. Do you actually have a finishing company? Or are you really, is your son working for a finisher?
No, I sold the construction side on my father's side. I sold his business 3.5 years ago to go full time in the development and of E5. It was something I was called to do. And I chose to do this, and I got my father's permission to sell that company because it was his, even though he had given it to me. It was still the right thing to do to ask him. And his comment to me, and it was the hardest decision I ever made, is to take something you watch your father and mother grind through building something and getting it up, and then handing it to me, and then me taking care of it for a certain amount of time, and to have this come into my life and give me an opportunity to not only give back, but to create a future for my daughter, which has autism, and she's mild mental retardation diagnosis. That's the reason I went into this endeavor, and that is the whole vision and mission behind E5. Is my daughter, is to create a better life for her and a better life for families like ours that has dealt with those diagnoses. And once my father set me down, we had that talk, and he said, absolutely, you have my blessing. I would do the same if it was my child, and she is my granddaughter, and I expect you to do nothing else but to follow your heart and the call that's on your life. So I did. And that was 3.5 years ago. My brother still runs that company with the new owners. Unfortunately, none of my sons are in the concrete industry. They do their own thing, and I encourage them to do that. And I gave them the same principles as my father gave me. And my wife gave the same principles that my mother gave me. So my two sons are on their own journey, and I encourage it.
Yeah, I agree. My kids, I got 2 kids, and they didn't want any part of working the hours that I worked.
Yeah.
And, you know, we just want better for our kids, right? My dad was a pharmacist, and I thought, well, I'll never go work in a drugstore, right?
Yeah.
But as a kid, I learned what a hard work ethic meant. It's totally logical that your father would free the bonds of any responsibility with that, just like my father did. He found it interesting that I became an engineer. He was very, very proud of all 5 of our kids. Like, I have a great close brother and sister that we all did something different. We all lived somewhere different, and, you know, it's just the way life is, right? And it's all about, you know, trying to make those values work, right?
That's right.
Kindness and integrity. Those are the things I got from my parents. And we share that, I think, Joe. Even though I went to, got a civil engineering degree, I value the time I spent with tradesmen. I had a unique experience because I was in operations for, right off the bat, I got an opportunity, and I just stayed close to the men. So I always had a lot of involvement with tradesmen. And if I couldn't talk to a guy like you, I would never be the engineer I am today, right?
Wow.
Because you got to listen to the tradesmen, right?
That's right.
The things you're saying today, I think they'll go viral. Sounds to me like you got a lot of success and a lot of good people. And maybe not enough good people. As companies grow, one of the challenges, Joe, you'll find is, you know, how do I keep up?
Yep.
But kudos to you. Tell me a little bit about Purdue University, because they've been instrumental. They've been a great partner, have they not?
Purdue University holds a special place in my heart at the current moment, and will for my entire life. And I owe all that to Dr. Luna Liu. Dr. Luna Liu is a precious professor, and my family will be forever indebted to her. She has not only been a good researcher for E5, but she's became a very good friend. And the technologies she was working on with her sensor technology, where it's real-time monitoring of the concrete, is what drew me up there. And because I really felt in my heart that what she was doing in her research, she could validate everything that I knew was going on in the field with E5. And that collaboration with Purdue University and Dr. Liu is priceless. I'm very grateful for that university and her research and work, because everything we knew or felt or seen happening in the field, she has been proving that day in and day out. And I'm proud to be part of that organization.
How did you find Belkovich?
That's a crazy story. When I was developing all this and in the middle of this, one of the concrete technicians that were helping me at the ready mix plant, man, we're doing all these crazy sequencings and everything, trying to figure all this out, because this wasn't just something we grabbed off the shelf and boom, there it was. I mean, I literally, with this ready mix company, spent 100,000 yards of concrete of finishing in different ratios and concoctions and different silicas and everything, trying to figure this out. And my guy come to me and goes, "Hey, there's this guy named Dr. John. I'm going to set a call up with him. I think he could help us figure a lot of this out. And I'm going to get him on the line." I'm like, "Okay, where's this guy at?" "Well, he's in Colorado." Well, anyways, he set up the phone call and I let those guys talk. Chris Wolf and Dustin Hartman was in the room with me, and they're all starting to call, and I'm listening to Dr. John talk. And it was like he was describing everything I was doing almost in the field. And I got kind of paranoid because I was in the middle of patent filings and everything else. And I just looked over at the two guys. I never even said a word in the meeting. I said, "Shut that down. We're done. We're not talking anymore." Well, I shut it down, and we had an NDA and everything with Dr. John. And about a year later, I got everything where I wanted it. Everything was working, and it was repeating itself. The patents were in place and in the pending states and all that. And I felt comfortable with moving forward. And I woke up one morning and I was just in meditation and prayer. And I just felt God go, "You need to reach out. You need to reach out." And I'm like, "Okay, I don't know if I want to." "Yeah, you're going to, because I have a purpose. I have a purpose for all this." "Okay." So I reached back out a year later to Dr. John and Whitney. And when I did, I said, "Hey, my name is Joe. I was on the other line. You know me by name, but you don't know me any other way." So we started talking again. I said, "I think you can help me finish this and get to my mission and vision of where E5 is." So I took a flight out there, and I met them two in 2019. And we started our conversation, and I explained to him the mission and vision behind E5. And it was more about, the mission is always going to be helping other families. It is not to become a billionaire by no means, but it's to help others. Because at the end of the day, it's about who we help. It's not about what we got in our bank accounts, because the money will just sit there. If we can't help other people, then what's the point of what we do in life? And he understood that. And from that moment on, our relationship has grown. And, I've told him many a times, I didn't just gain a friend, I gained a brother. And Dr. John and I have a very close relationship. And I'm thankful for God putting us together and him helping me get where I'm at too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think he's a man of integrity, and I think he's a great family man, from what I can tell.
Yes, he is.
Whitney's a great partner, and he talks about his kids. I mean, the only time I can't get him is when he's with those kids. Right?
Yep.
But he seems pretty busy, and it's good that we can support him. We're doing quite a round of testing. Tell me about your can you talk to me about at the batch plant level? What is, like, there'll be a lot of people that from batch plants that want to listen to this.
Mhm.
So is it simple? Do they just have to have a separate suspended area where they can dose their weight of water properly? Do they mix it with the water first?
No, no. And that's where we found out and struggled for so many. And so many in this industry struggled trying to figure out nano materials in general. Whether you're messing with the nano silicas or the titanium dioxide, any of the nano world is much different than our traditional ways of mixing concrete. And when we went into this, it was the hardest thing to understand because tradition says you do A, B, C, D, E, and that's it. You never deviate from that. Well, the ASTM says this, or ACI says this, and we always follow these rules. And then we try to take new technology and fit them in to these rules. Well, nanosilicas don't do that. No nano world fits into today's standards. And the most important thing with any nano is sequencing. If you don't pay attention to the sequencing and understand sequencing, then you'll pull your hair out because you're just going to continue chasing your tail. And it is the single most important thing when you're using nanomaterials is sequencing. And you got to kind of understand sequencing. Other admixture companies tell you to do it this way or do it this way. Well, put our product here, put our product here. You actually got to become an expert in their products to understand how their products might disturb those nanoparticles. So it's kind of an educational lesson with producers. And I spend countless hours educating them when they're working with our technology because we're having to change the sequencing of their headwater or change their aggregate or change their sand and change. All right, we always go in, tail end, period, end of story. It's just the way it works. It won't work any other way. It'll fail every time if you do not keep nanosilica last. E5 has to be last, end of it. Everybody else can move, jockey around, but that's where we become the professional and say, look, I understand a Sika product better than Sika does. I understand BASF better than they understand their stuff. I understand St. Gobain's better than they understand themselves because I have learned their chemistry and where it works more efficient. They say do this, I say no, it don't work that way. It needs to go here. We go here. We make everything more efficient. So that is a challenge, getting the ready mix producers to get out of their own way and take a chance. And let that chance teach them and get out of their traditional ways. That is a challenge. It doesn't slow their mixing process or the speed of how they do something down. It will actually create a more efficient way of mixing. And sometimes their products that they're using can be reduced because of the efficiencies of the nanosilicas.
Yeah, I understand. So we would typically, for people that may need the basics, engineers that may need the basics, I mean, essentially they put the dry in, right? You put your aggregate fine coarse and you put your cement in. And then like a mag ox, would that go in at the start if it's dry?
When we were here doing those parking garages, it was always kind of in the middle of the sequencing of the mixing time.
Right. So then if somebody's doing a water reducer, that's going to precede you. I get the message though. You're last. Right?
Yeah, I'm last.
And people can't really screw up as long as you're last.
Well,
right?
Here's where you can screw up. This is where I've had to learn and educate myself on, and I'm just going to use them because they are one of my favorite type of admixtures to mess with in my career. It's Sika products. I know them very well because I've used them for so long in my finishing career. Some of their mid ranges, they traditionally tell you to go in at the last. No, we change that. If we're messing with a Lehigh cement, we like to put that mid range of Sika in the middle of the mix. We like to change the headwater dosage. So we'll put in 70% of the headwater, then we add the coarse ag, sand, cement, and then the mid range, let it all spin as it's cycling. And then you come in with your air, if you got air or something on the back side of that. And then we come in with the nanosilica along with the tailwater. And then we allow that mix to run. So, and that is a key element too, Martin, to remember. Not all cements are created equal. And these cements are going through chemistry changes themselves at the current moment with the environmental thing that's going on. And we have to keep an eye on those changes because they can affect the sequencing of a mid-range or a polycarboxylate or air or a retarder or hydration stabilizers. They can affect the concrete. Now, when the nano silica doesn't affect anything because it's always last and it's always wanting to treat the water to treat the cement. So it kind of just builds itself. But the change in everything is the other admixtures because you don't want a chemical cocktail at the end of your mix. You don't want to be adding everything at the end because remember, silica's coming in, and when silica's coming in, it's looking for one thing to attach to, water. And it's coming in. But if you're putting other chemicals here in with it, it's attaching to that chemical and it can't attach to the water and it can't work.
So with the idea of tailwater, let me guess, it's probably 25% of the total water. And it's not that much? You can't say?
It can be different depending on the cement you're using. And I even I got to study the blains of the cement manufacturing. You get into the higher blains of the cement, then you need a little bit more tailwater because of the finenesses of the cement. And then we're always adjusting these on the cement manufacturer. There's sometimes we might have 60% of the headwater in up front, might be 40% of the tail on the back. There's times when I got 80% up front, I got 20% in the rear. And that's a lot of that is the cement manufacturer. So here locally, I deal with 4 different cement manufacturers. So we kind of know in our geographical area, kind of how we work with the producers and get them set up on their tailwater or their headwater additions.
So for the benefit of many owners that are listening, and I think that it's also true that many engineers might be listening, or finishers even, the people that are going to handle your typical admix, we're excited about the 5 product. There's also the aspect of slump. So then slump, you would say the total water is going to be based on slump, but maybe the tailwater also is a bit of a slump touch.
Yes.
No,
kind of that adjustment.
Yeah. And we're testing cylinders, right? So you would get some breaks, you get success with one supplier, and then you continue success, right?
Correct.
If you know that cement plant is of a certain nature and you've done a bridge with that guy, I'm going to say a bridge, but or a structure, and seen breaks. So you would go a lot off 7-day breaks then?
First things we when I get working with a producer, and I know they're starting to get serious about implementing the E5, I usually go up and I'll grab enough material to make several batches here back at the lab, and I'll work with their materials and kind of get a baseline where they're at. And then once we get that baseline, then we work from the real field, and I'm good with the 7 days when they're in the real field because I've already got 28-day data from the lab. So that's one thing that we've been very successful on here is able to really truly replicate field to lab to where most labs can't replicate the field. And working with the actual product or the actual material of that geographical area and understanding it has been a key to our success with those customers.
That's great. So up in Canada, then we'll have some experimentation, and I look forward to your guidance on that. I'm a pretty good listener. When I have confidence that somebody knows more than me, you got to listen, right? And there's no point reinventing your wheel.
Right.
But tell me, in the US, are you touching a lot of states now? It must be a quick word of mouth expansion that's happening for you.
Yeah. So, with the success here in Indiana and the collaboration with the contractors and the Department of Transportation, Ohio Department of Transportation, it looks like they're going to start heading down that path of trials on bridges. Kentucky is also in the mix. We've done several trial pours in the state of Mississippi, Alabama. We're in the middle of doing some DOT testing in the laboratories in Texas. And a lot of that is just educating and giving them the knowledge that we've done for the last several years. And it's starting to pay off. And those guys are starting to see the same thing the state of Indiana is seeing.
And so what about your experience on the West Coast with shotcrete? I mean, I always found the East Coast was slow to adopt shotcrete. And I think you said earlier that you would reduce rebound. You know what a beehive test is? When you test the shotcrete, it comes out almost like a beehive. That's something that they do in Vancouver and Toronto. And we've got a pretty active shotcrete market in Toronto, but it's very busy in Vancouver, as you know, in Seattle, down California, they like shotcrete. And some of our patents and footprint play into the shotcrete area. We believe that we have waterproof concrete now. And you've probably seen dimensional stability, particularly with mag ox in there to help where you don't see cracks, right? Is it fair to say there is no cracks?
With what I'm involved with you guys right now, yeah, you guys are on the right path of creating that crack-free environment. And my product will reduce the cracking to a point, but then it needs another ingredient like you're creating with your mixes to get to that next level. We've had a minimal amount of cracking on our bridges. Now, I would safely say we've reduced our cracking in our bridges and our overlays and our structures by 70% within that, and that's because of the better hydration. Some cracks you're hard to get away from when it becomes, if it's a structural crack versus a thermal crack. Some of those things are unavoidable sometimes, and a lot of that can be a design thing. But if the concrete has the right recipe, yeah, you're on the verge of crack free.
Yeah, I do believe we're there, and our tests are showing that we're there. We'll share those with you guys. And I don't really know if there's, other than the way the crystalline industry operates, which is to crack fill. I've talked frequently with, in my presentations, that really the goal is to try and reduce footprint and for our company and for our objective. And I find that guys put a lot of rebar in that isn't structural. And you talk about getting it out of the way of yourself, and sometimes you do a better job with less rebar.
Yeah.
So we'll prove that. Tell me about the heat of hydration. Do you find that that's still kind of a root cause of cracks?
Yeah, you get the thermal, you get the concrete gets too hot, and you cause your own thermal expansion. The weather plays a lot into it. In my finishing days, that was one of the big things I would watch for. If your concrete's 70 degrees and your outdoor temperature is 30, I mean, you already got a 40-degree span. I mean, you got cold air blowing over the surface of that concrete. All you've done is upped your risk for shrinkage cracks and plastic cracks and everything else, because you now created a 40-degree differential in temperatures. Yeah, you got to watch that hydration. So most guys don't like to hear this, but I always try to keep that 20-degree difference between my concrete and the ambient temperature I was pouring in. And more guys want to speed it up to get home. Yeah, there's overtime cost in it. There's this or that. But I mean, if you're trying to give an owner what he deserves, then you've got to bid it that way. So I always try to give the best product to the owner, because he's the one investing. It's his building or his house or his driveway or the government's or your taxpayers. It's their investment. And I always tried to be honest to give those people what their money was being spent on. So those are things in the industry are not taught very well. And I think we need to do a better job as an industry trying to bring back some of that integrity and honor back to what we do in our industry. Because we've gone so much, it's all about the almighty dollar, that we're allowing that to control our quality.
Yeah, I'm 100% behind you with not using water to finish. And what you're talking about is heat and hoarding, or a little bit of tarping. Sometimes just a little bit of tarping makes a world of difference.
Makes a big difference.
And slowing the heat of hydration through, those are admixes that I think Sika does have some nice products, and I endorse Sika as well. You know, I've got a good relationship with Sika in Canada, and we're looking actually to talk to them, and similar to what Jim Perkenis did with Mag Ox, is he basically made it available to Sika because they have the sales system to get it across to more contractors. And I think they're proving their worth, you know, as people and as applicators. So we share that, Joe. I think we're, do you have any questions for me, Joe? You know, I appreciate the note about the autism. Where would somebody give money to? You know, you might want to make a pitch for the, is there an American-wide association that we can get you to quote, or is there a website?
Yeah, it's www.givingfamilyhope.org. That's the website address.
Givingfamilyhope.org. So everyone take note of that and reach in your pocket. I agree with you that we don't need all the money we have. And I wish there was more billionaires that felt that way, right?
Yeah.
And you never know, Joe, you might end up a billionaire even if you try to give it away.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot of good, and I thank you from the concrete world. What you've done is really remarkable. And you got my full support, Joe. And thanks for being on the Value Engineering Experts today.
Thank you, Martin.
Take care, bud. I love you.
All right. You too, buddy.